So, Matt, this is my first visit to Donna Nook in all the times that I've lived in and around Lincolnshire, and I've come at the best time, haven't I?
You have, yes. Well, welcome. Yes, right at the pupping season here. We've got a bull, cow and pup in front of us here, showing a bit of aggression. We're right at the peak, really, of our pupping season that takes place from October right through to the end of December.
That's the seal making a noise, not you.
It is. That's the pup calling mum, wanting to be fed. This pup here is probably about 3 weeks old. It's just starting to molt, but still wanting to be fed. And the bull here is just hanging around wanting to mate with the female.
Now, this is interesting. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But just looking at this pup here that's waving at me at the minute, almost the size of the cow.
Yes, when they're born, they're about 14 kilograms in weight. They'll double that weight in the first week. And then there'll be something around 45 kilograms after 3 weeks, at which point they're fully weaned. So lactation finishes with the female. Grey seal milk is 52% fat, about 19% protein. So hence they put on a lot of weight in a short space of time.
Let's talk about the area where we are. Donna Nook is known as a bombing range, isn't it? And the red flags are up. So
yep.
Is it still active at this time of the year when the seals are here? It's
active all year round. It's been an air weapons range since 1973, and Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust has had a management agreement with the MOD here since 1978. No seals have ever been harmed by any activities with the aircraft over, and basically there's a series of targets down the beach. In this day and age, any of the modern fighter aircraft that are coming in, and some of the rotary winged aircraft as well, use thermal imaging cameras. They certainly wouldn't be firing at any targets if there was any hint of anything lying underneath. It might not be a seal.
No, indeed. But you were saying you had aircraft over here this morning before I arrived.
Yeah, there were 4 Eurofighters came in this morning, and we often have F-15s, the Americans coming in to use the range as well. So yeah, the only target they won't use is target 1 from the 1st of November to the end of December, and that's because it's right on the Nook, which is the narrowest point to the sea, where a lot of the seals actually make their way into the dunes to have their pups.
This is incredible here, and I did just say to you, how far does the sea come in here? And you were just telling me it is actually high tide. I can't see the sea.
It's high tide. I know we're only at about a 6.15 metre tide this afternoon. High tide's at 2 o'clock. And yeah, it's barely reached the green shore, has it? You can barely see the sea from here. It's about 1 kilometre away. Only on sort of spring tides do we see the tide really come up to the front of the dunes here. So probably only sort of once or twice a month, if that.
You've got the fencing area here just before we get into the dunes itself. So the seals try and get as close to the dune as they can.
Yeah, so here it is quite narrow. As we walk further down, you'll see there's more dune frontage in front of the fencing. But the reason why they're coming to have their pups so far up the beach is just to keep away from the inundation of the tide. When grey seal pups are born, they're not born with their adult coat. They have this white coat, which is light and fluffy, which traps air, called lanugo. And they lose that, they molt that and gain their adult coat after 3 weeks. So until they do that, because they haven't put a layer of fat on, they're quite wrinkly when they're born. They need that fur in order to keep themselves warm. So keeping out the inundation of the tide actually helps them. So we're a very safe beach here for them pupping, which is why they've chosen Donna Nook, because they can come in. And it's, probably only once a month when we get a tide where it'll actually reach them.
And is there a history? Does it go back hundreds of years, do you think, that seals would have come and pupped here?
Well, pupping has been known here since at least the 1970s.
Right.
Pupping used to occur on the outer sand ridges nearer to the tide line. And then in the early 80s, some of those cows came into the dunes and realised that obviously this was much safer than having the inundation of the tide twice a day. And then since the early 80s, when there were just a handful of pups born here, the numbers have been a bit like a hockey stick graph, really. For the last 4 years, we've had sort of 2,200 pups born here.
Wow.
So that, it's been a steady increase since the early 80s.
And talking about how far away the sea is, we see some ships just on the horizon there. So basically, the seals haul themselves out and head for the dune then.
That's right. Obviously they know when it's time to pup. The females will usually come in a couple of days before it's time to give birth. Because they don't feed when they're up here, they want to be up here for a minimum amount of time as possible. But I've timed a seal actually coming in from the tide line up to here, which is probably about 1 kilometre in places. And it would probably take them sort of about 45, 50 minutes. Yeah, it's quite incredible, really.
They've got to be keen then.
Yes, yeah. I call it hauling. That's they haul themselves up. But
I think of them hauling out of the sea. But what about the actual flomping along?
Well, they don't walk or run, do they? So Ruth, my colleague, who've met before, she likes to call it flumping.
Flumping. See, that describes it for me.
Yeah.
Flumping. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's one that's sort of flumped in the water at the minute.
There is. That bull there is obviously given up now, hasn't he? And is just resting there. They do like to lie in the creeks and the pools. I think they feel security being around water.
And the thing is, and we'll go into the detail now, because I hadn't appreciated this.
Right.
Okay, so the cows don't stay with the pups for that long, do they?
No. So when they come in, they're in for a couple of days, then they give birth, and they'll be lactating for about 18 to 21 days. So the pup will be fully weaned at about 3 weeks in general. And then that's her job done. So the pup is left on its own. While she's been here, she's not been feeding. She may have lost about a third to 40% of her body weight. So she needs to get back to sea and start feeding up. And it's at that point then that the pup is pretty much left on its own. It will be basically living off its own fat reserves for the next 2 weeks. So it may be 5 weeks on the beach before it then will feel hunger and decide it's time to make its way out to sea for the first time.
Hence why the pup is so fat. I don't want to be rude to the pup there, but it's got to live on that then until it goes out to sea.
Exactly. It's just going to live off its own fat reserves, yeah. So it will slim down. They're quite barrel-shaped, aren't they?
Yeah.
Not very agile. So we'll see some weaned pups a little bit further up where they're now starting to explore in the creeks, and they slim down, a lot more agile, and as I say, hunger will kick in and that will drive them to sea.
But the parents then aren't there to teach them how to fish, how to catch fish or anything. They're literally fending for themselves once the cow goes off.
That's right, yeah, absolutely independent of the adults. Yep, absolutely.
Now, the other trick of this is, okay, the cows come up, have their pups. Why are the bulls here? As if I didn't know.
Well, they have no maternal instincts at all. They're not here to have anything to do with the raising of the pup. They're only here for one thing, and that is to mate with the females and produce next year's offspring, basically. Okay,
so they mate now.
Yes.
We're into December.
Yep.
But they won't have the pups until next November, December.
So you're thinking, Melvyn,
yes,
that the gestation period
months.
is 12 months or 11 and a half months or whatever. But if I was to tell you that the gestation period is 8 months, how can that be?
Yes, yeah. How can that be?
So there's a delayed implantation of about 100 days because her body is not in a good condition to develop another pup so soon after just having a pup herself. So basically, this delayed implantation for 100 days then gives her body time to recover. And that's called obligate embryonic diapause, a little bit of a mouthful.
I'm glad you had to say that.
So basically what happens is the egg is fertilised, it splits into 4, but it doesn't actually attach to the uterus wall. So it's free swimming and is known as a blastocyst. Only after 100 days does that attach to the uterus wall and start to develop true as an embryo. And then the eighth month gestation period kicks in, brings her back round to a full year's cycle.
Did you know all this before you became warden?
I knew a bit of it, yeah, but we get asked so many questions by the visiting public that it just rolls off the tongue after a little while.
So bull will hopefully mate with cow.
Yes.
Off they'll go.
Yep.
They'll come back here next year and have that pup. It's an incredible story, isn't it?
It's incredible. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people visit here and think they don't do a lot, do they? They're just laid around. Well, one of the reasons they're laid around is obviously they're conserving energy because they're not feeding while they're here. And but when we tell people, you know, what's actually going on and the story around them, people are just fascinated. Yeah, and then when you get interactions between, you know, the bulls and the cows and the bulls fighting as well, you know, they're competing to mate with as many females as they can. Yeah. So it's you know, I sort of liken this to. You know, a David Attenborough moment, really. Where else can you go and see large mammals en masse so close and get really sort of close to all that's going on? You know, the fighting between the bulls, cows having their pups, mating, producing next year's offspring, and the development of the pups until they leave the beach. It's just a fascinating experience.
One of the key things we want to get across, fencing here,
yes.
It's important that if people do visit, they don't attempt to go across the fence, because from their safety point of view, but also from the seals' point of view as well.
That's right. I mean, so originally when, back in the early 80s, when there was only a few pups born, it was only a few local people that knew that the grey seals were here, you know, giving birth. Over time, as those pup numbers have increased and the number of seals has increased, of course, news has got round and, you know, the visitor numbers have increased also. So what started off as just having a Land Rover parked on the beach and warning people to keep a distance has now then gone from a roped off area to a single fence, and now we have an all ability access path so that people of all abilities can actually view the seals, and a double fence so people don't try and reach through and touch the seals.
Because it can affect the seals. You know, you can lose some pups, can't you, if they get too much interference?
The scent of the pup, that recognition between cow and pup is important, particularly in the first few days, you know, maintaining that bond. And, you know, if somebody was to reach through and stroke a pup or do something like that, if they put their scent on there, then the cow might, you know, decide to leave the pup. It's not a wise thing to do. Grey seal pups are born with their adult teeth, and they have a lot of bacteria in their mouths. You know, Inuits lose fingers because, you know, wounds don't heal. They have to sort of have them amputated. So there's a thing called seal finger.
You haven't got it?
No,
Thank
still
goodness.
got all
Still got
fingers.
yours,
Yeah,
right,
I still have to do lots of counting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not wise to try and although they look cute and cuddly,
Yeah.
and they've got long claws as well on the end of their flippers.
Why so many these days then? Because you said in the 80s, you know, a vehicle down here, you know, be aware of the seals. Now we're dealing with huge numbers. You've not done anything to the environment here, have you?
No, not at all. Basically, what's happened is the lack of persecution by ourselves, by man.
Right, okay.
So, you know, they've been hunted in the past for their fur, for oil from their fat, and from you know, and for their meat.
But not off the Lincolnshire coast, surely.
No, but elsewhere.
Right.
And so, you know, sort of going back to the early part of the century, you know, you would only find seal colonies on remote Scottish islands, because they wanted to keep away from their main predator. And so the only predator, with them being an apex predator themselves, the only predators for grey seals is orca and great white shark. Now, we don't necessarily get those in our waters
not too
here.
many.
No, but some of these seals may encounter orca up in Shetland, for instance. So basically, up until I think the last culls for grey seals was around sort of 77, 78. There was even supposed to be a cull on the Farne Islands, and there was public outcry then. We all remember the days of, you know, the Rainbow Warrior and Greenpeace. So there was public outcry, and basically they put a stop to those culls. Now, the reasons for those culls was because they were thought they were damaging commercial fish stocks. So the government wanted to sort of keep a a restriction on the number of seals, obviously to preserve our own commercial fish stocks. So it's interesting that since the 70s, numbers have then increased. But there's various things that have taken place to prove that, grey seals are not just feeding on commercial fish species. They will feed on, benthic species as well, sort of bottom feeding fish, not all just commercial species.
Now, I suppose this is key time that people think of Donna Nook and the seals. What about the rest of the year? What else happens here during the rest of the year?
Yeah, so, the seals are here all year round. They only come into the dunes to have their pups. So they're out on the outer sandbanks and things. We've got a number of habitats here. Donna Nook's a national nature reserve, part of the Lincolnshire Coronation Coast National Nature Reserve. We're just at the mouth of the Humber here, 7 miles off Spurn Point Lighthouse, which is just there in the distance.
Yeah.
7 miles as the crow flies. So this is an important wintering area for waders and wildfowl. But in the summer, well, if I just mention the habitats, of course we've got the sea itself and the estuary, and then we've got intertidal mudflats and sandflats, then leading into salt marsh, upper salt marsh, and then into the sand dunes themselves, where we've got dune grassland and dune scrub. So in the summer, very different. The dune grassland is fabulous for different insects, things like the great green hair streak butterfly. And also breeding for several different warbler species. So we get a number of migrants that visit the place in the summer, and then of course obviously with the sea buckthorn berries in the winter, we get quite an attraction of winter thrushes and things as well, which come and visit the coast.
So Donna Nook is not just for seals.
It's not just for seals, no. And at high tide at the moment, probably just bit out of shot really, but there's huge flocks of brent geese and oyster catcher and redshank and things out there at the moment. So it's not just the air weapons range being off limits for the public is not just benefiting the seals here, but it's also benefiting the other wildlife out there on the salt marsh and the sand and mud flats.